G'day, gang. So, this is a topic, again, near and dear to my heart. I wanted to talk about violence in entertainment. It's a topic I think that comes up constantly, that a lot of people have very extreme and polar views on, which I completely understand. Um, but I am coming from kind of the middle of the line. I think that there are some violence that's completely unnecessary, and I think that most is pretty fun in entertainment, particularly in gaming. I'm a big advocate of violence in video games in the right context, but I think that, again, it's not often that the context is off, because usually if you're interacting with a digital interactive media such as gaming, well, really only gaming, yeah, good one, uh, that it's particularly impactful, I think is the best way to explain that. And I think that saying that violence can be very complicated, and we definitely, there are definitely some opinions that I completely agree with, but I don't want them changing gaming. That is that it can be actually quite destructive to think about desensitizing yourself to violence. I'm personally in the mindset that there is no long-term evidence for the fact that it does desensitize you to violence, but I can understand why people hold that opinion, and I am very sensitive to the fact that a lot of people don't personally want to see violence, and I completely and entirely understand that, particularly if you have a background of violence, or a history of being exposed to violence or being the victim of violent behavior. So completely understand why a lot of people don't want to see violence in media and entertainment, particularly entertainment. I don't have much opinion about the news because I really don't watch much of it, so it's a bit silly for me to include that in my own opinion videos. But I think violence in television and movies and books and plays and games is very essential, in my opinion. I think that when conflict gets heated, so heated, you have to do something about it. The characters have to do something about it. I think that violence holds no place in a civil society, excluding having to defend someone else from violence. I don't think that anyone should typically be violent ever, personally. But I think in these complicated settings where they don't have the same laws, where oftentimes a hero has to defeat an enemy to save a lot of people, or when a misguided person thinks that the only way to pursue peace is through violence, or any sort of angle like that, I think that it is awesome, an awesome narrative device. And if you were to tell me that games like Dark Tide, I like that one, couldn't exist, my life would be drastically lower in quality. Drastically. Because as much as violence can be a critical narrative device, it's also just really, really fun in gaming. You know, you just get like the classic old days for me of playing Left 4 Dead and just having hordes of zombies to just obliterate and dominate and get through, and be oftentimes overwhelmed if you play on harder difficulties. That's when it gets really fun. You know, it's part of the fun. It's part of the joy. It's part of the, but also on the other side of it, in the narrative sense, it's part of the pain, and it's part of the suffering to see your characters wounded, or to read your characters wounded, or to have characters die. That's part of showing, which is just as important as telling. In Don't let any author tell you that only showing is the option. Showing and telling in correct usage is very important, but having it shown in a setting that it's deadly sometimes is essential in showing, in killing a character. And I think having deadly settings is really, really important if you want that real cutting edge of emotional, artistic expression. I think there isn't really a comparison for violence in entertainment, in narrative. I don't think there is a comparison for satisfaction in violence in terms of video games either. Again, cutting through hordes of zombies and you get into the safe room. Especially the good old days playing Left 4 Dead when there's a tank like bashing up against the door just as you get through. It's a big hulky guy. It's a big tough scary dude. It's very satisfying to get into that safe room, lock the door behind you and be like, victory. Same with Dark Tide. It's very exciting to extract. It's loads of games. I mean, those are just literally two that I happen to think of just randomly, probably because I was looking through my Steam library before, but regardless. Oh, look, that's a tangent. Sorry. I think violence has a really significant place in entertainment. I think it's really important. And I think that, for the most part, the way that it's used is particularly significant in, defining the human suffering. You know, you can't feel what a character feels in a movie or a book or a game. You just can't feel what they feel in any entertainment. But you can show them, you can show people what they feel by heightening the discomfort to a point in which that is unavoidable in the audience. And I think that's where violence is very, very significant in play. Because if you show certain elements of human society that has like a lot of complications and nuances, not everyone will connect. But violence is an easy way to make people understand that the situation has escalated beyond repair. And I think that it's a breaking point, and I think that it's a very essential vehicle for showing people how far things have come in a narrative sense. I completely understand why people don't want violence in certain media, and I completely understand that. It's too much fun for me. I think it's too much fun and it's too accessible in terms of emotional investment, and it's too significant too in terms of being able to have characters die and other characters fighting literally to try and save them and being unable to do so. I think those sorts of moments are so profoundly defining for your narrative and your characters that violence being the vehicle for that, there really is no alternative. No accessible alternative that's as transparent, because I think that there are lots of ways that you can make characters die in settings that are gut-wrenching and difficult, but I think that being creative in the way that characters do that, such as a door closing between two characters on a spaceship and the other side of the ship is going to be vented into space. I only have to say words like that and you can understand that is a scenario in which that is absolutely horrific. That is a scenario in which that is completely unavoidable as well. So there are numerous circumstances in which that you can reach an audience within an instant and a single moment. But I think violence is something that is so inherently relatable and so understandable, and to a lot of people it is both completely wanted to be avoided, and a lot of people it is something that they themselves think is positive, which is not my personal camp, but I can understand why people think that. There are a lot of violent places in the world today. Unfortunately, there's no way around that, no way around saying that is a truth, that there are places in the world that are genuinely quite violent. And to those people too, seeing what is relevant to them currently is just as important as seeing it seeing something that is not relevant to people in mostly non-violent countries. We can all relate, we can all understand. It hits us all different, but seeing violence in entertainment against the characters that you don't want to have violence against in particular, like smaller characters, I think putting violence against those characters is a very complicated narrative that really doesn't have much of a comparison. So for me personally, I think violence, when done appropriately, is a really, really fantastic narrative and entertainment tool. And if it ever went away, my life would be so different. Not only in the way that I tell stories and enjoy stories, but also too in the way that I love to cut through waves of enemies in video games. Like, please, gore maximum, let's go. Please don't take away my violence. But I'd love to hear people's comments, and as always, I really, really want opinions on what other people think. My mic is cutting out a lot. I really want other people's opinions on what they think. I want to hear from other people. But thank you for listening to me, especially if you made it all the way through the end. That's I got to start giving out medals, man. Thanks everybody. Please tell me what you think. Okay, bye.